Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the new album from Lindsey Stirling, titled Shatter. I wasn't planning on talking about this album. See, since the last time I talked about dubstep was with Skrillex, and since I haven't had much of a chance to familiarize myself with that musical subgenre more since that review, I felt as though tackling more reviews of dubstep might be a misstep. And since I also tend to be a music critic with more of a focus on lyrics, primarily instrumental albums leave me feeling simultaneously lacking in material to write about and somewhat out of my depth. I tend to focus on lyrics more than most because, well, I'm a writer and my expertise is stronger in that sort of analysis. But while I have a fair amount of musical knowledge, I'm by no means truly classically trained outside of several years of piano and a few years of theory. And with all of that, I was feeling more than a little intimidated to talk about Lindsey Stirling and her newest orchestral dubstep album, Shatter. A critically beloved YouTube musician you all should know, who built a rather amazingly huge following through covers and fusing her amazing violin skills with electronica. She's got more musical talent and creativity than I'll ever have. But that being said, I was curious all the same about her newest album, and I figured, you know what, the more exposure I get to these sort of eclectic fusions of genres, the better it'll be for me in the long run anyways. So I bought Shatter by Lindsey Stirling, and I hope for the best. Did I end up getting it? Well, for the most part, I completely did. All the same though, this review will likely end up being pretty short, as though if you're a fan of Lindsey Stirling and you've been watching her material on YouTube for some time, you'll all know exactly what you're getting with this album. For those of you not as familiar, it's a very good album, but in my opinion, not quite a great one. Arguably lacking more songs with real distinguishing character and experimentation to really make it stand out for me. So okay, to explain all this, let's get the lyrics and vocals out of the way very quickly for the two songs they're mostly featured on. On the two songs with full lyrics, the title track is the clearly superior song. As much as Stirling says that she doesn't have a lot of experience writing songs, there's a lot of vulnerability and well-articulated poetry in that track, and delivered with a lot of character and raw passion from both the violin and from the guest vocalist Lizzie Hale of Hailstorm. Now the other track with full vocals is We Are Giants from Dia Frampton, and unfortunately it mostly falls into generic self-esteem anthem territory. Not bad by any stretch, but not especially memorable, both in lyrics and in the melodic presentation. Now, thematically on this album, it's an album about breaking free from established conventions and old habits. And when Lindsey Stirling actually does this on this record, she gets better results more often than not. Take a song like Heist, for example, which goes for an edgier, darker feel with the thicker, grimier synth balancing against the lower tones from the violin, and never really quite overwhelming that central melody. And then we've got Round Table Melody, easily my favorite track on this album, with the explosive, chugging percussion, the guitar riff balancing against the lo-fi violin pickup, and a heaviness to it that wouldn't be out of place on a symphonic metal track. I really dug this song. But what's more important is that both of these songs highlight something very important, and what I like most about Lindsey Stirling's composition and production when it's done at its best. The violin melody placed front and center, driving the track, and then the electronic elements placed above and below it in the mix, supporting the melody but never really driving it or forcing it to conform to their standards. And unfortunately, when that balance gets a little bit skewed, this album does falter at points. The prime examples of this are when the dubstep elements attempt to drive more of the melodic progression instead of the violin, instead of the dubstep more only focusing on the beat, like on, say, Night Vision. Instead of allowing the violin to drive the melody and the actual pace of the song, it feels hemmed in by the gurgling dubstep, only allowed a few glorious moments of crescendo before getting dragged back. Mirror House has a very similar problem to a lesser extent though, as it tries to have a counterbalance melody in the backing vocals and the keyboards, but instead of blending with the violin, it begins to overwhelm it. And then there's the song Swag, which tries to fuse a much busier synth line with the violin's melody, and despite Stirling's usual skittering tendency to ride the dubstep very well, the track just feels a little bit too cluttered to match the rollicking tone that Stirling takes. She goes for something that's a little bit more exuberant, and the cluttered synth line doesn't really match up well with that. But I think the biggest issue that I have with this album comes from the choice of electronica to support the violin. For example, on songs like Ascendance, the electronic tones are very clean and spacious and airy, which does fit the thematic progression, but the tone that Lindsey Stirling most uses on her violin is a little bit more rough and ragged and adventurous, and her playing style is more experimental and more willing to leap into sharp staccato sequences to bounce off the electronica. That's honestly why, despite my usual aversion to this typical brand of shallower dubstep, I don't mind it here when Stirling's violin takes control of the melody. But at the same time, I don't always feel that the electronic elements are as rich or as textured as they really could be to complement the violin line more and build to a more potent, expansive sound. And really, the first place this could have been improved was in the percussion. The beats often feel a little bit underweight here throughout mostly in the top half of the mix, and they could have done with a bit of a thicker, more textured presence to add a little bit more balance, maybe going a little bit deeper across the mix, maybe giving a little bit more dynamic presence. Now granted, that said, when she went for an edgier, rougher sound, she tended to score more hits than misses, which means I can confidently recommend this album. Yes, it's still very much in her wheelhouse, and if you're a fan of her previous material, she'll definitely like this. But at the same time, there are moments of more progressive experimentation on this album that I really did appreciate, that helped some tracks really stand out for me. And as long as the production remembers to keep Lindsey Stirling front and center above the rest of her electronica, she can score a lot of hits here. So with that, I'm inclined to give this album a 7 out of 10 and a definite recommendation for you all to go check this out. It's always nice to see fellow YouTubers succeed. And with this album, Lindsey Stirling continues to show that she definitely deserves her success. So check it out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's anything I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or if there's any other albums coming out that you'd like me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. So until then, I'm Mark. I'll see you next time.